From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. The Colorado Tourism Office recently published a report that outlined the economic impact of travel in different regions around the state and how much those travel dollars are growing. The report labeled one region the Rockies Playground. It's an area that sprawls between resort towns like Breckenridge, Vail, and Aspen. And visitor spending in that region grew by about 50% between 2013 and 2023. That surge in visitors and the region being labeled a playground by tourism officials caught the attention of Scott Fitzwilliams. He's the supervisor of the White River National Forest, the most visited national forest in the country, including places like Hanging Lake and Maroon Bells. Scott says this growth in tourism signals a moment where Coloradans need to decide what's the right balance between treating public lands as a playground and protecting them.
It wasn't so much that, it upset me. It just made me think, given the trends we're seeing, the massive expansion in tourism and visitation, that, this is a national forest and we need to look at the other values, not just the playground aspects. And so given the numbers we're seeing, the impacts we're seeing, and the trends we're seeing, I think it's time to step back a little bit and say, what is a sustainable level of tourism?
Right.
And recognizing we got to look at the other values that are so important to the forest.
And I'm curious what draws so many people to this area. Can you describe what it looks like?
Well, it's some of the most amazing country in the entire United States, from high peaks and gorgeous river valleys and everything in between. And then we have the resort communities that are set up to draw, these are international known cities across the country. They're known across the world, Aspen, Vail, Summit County.
Sure.
And so you have that combination of some amazing scenery and amazing outdoor recreation opportunities with these communities that attract a lot of attention.
Well, and the report pointed out that this area brings in 15% of travel revenue for the state. That makes it the second highest regional earner behind Denver. What is your reaction as the manager of this national forest to that amount of tourism in your region?
Well, what we're seeing is on the ground is some troubling trends. We have trailheads that people have to walk a mile on the road because it's so crowded and there's not enough room to park. We're seeing impacts on riparian areas, the stream banks, or the immediate adjacent area around a lake or a pond where people are camping and that we don't have campsites. And then just general crowding in places like our wilderness areas where the Wilderness Act talks about solitude and untrammeled, and if you're running into 150 or 200 people in a couple hours, that's really not the experience that wilderness is set up to do. So it's this combination of things. I just think we're at a critical time to say, how do we address this? It's not easy. We've got to work very collaboratively to figure out where we're going to go with this.
It's hard to think about solitude when I think about places like Hanging Lake near Glenwood Springs, which is a very popular hiking area. I think its popularity was driven by some social media influencers in the last few years. What kind of effects has this increase had at Hanging Lake?
Well, it led to the permit and limited entry system. We saw in the course of 7 years, visitation at Hanging Lake go from about 75 to 80,000 people a year to 170,000 per year. And that was just unsustainable. We were literally, it was causing traffic jams on I-70, and we had to do something. Now currently the trail's being reconstructed, but from the fires and floods. But we have a permit system where you take a bus and you get a reservation, and people really enjoy the experience much better. You lose the spontaneity, but we're protecting the resource and we're protecting the experience people come here for. It's a little cliche, but this forest is a golden goose. It produces $1.6 billion to the GDP, 22,000 jobs, and it's a goose that's giving in so many ways. But we don't want to, make it so it can't lay the eggs anymore. And we're at a situation where we've got to take some steps or make some, management changes that provide for those experiences that people come here for.
Another area I wanted to ask about is Maroon Bells. That's a very popular area outside of Aspen. How is the popularity of Maroon Bells affecting the environment there?
Yeah, similar thing. We have the Maroon Bells Scenic Area and then Maroon Bells Snowmass Wilderness right there. And we have a shuttle system we've had in place for 40 years up there, and that has helped. And now it's a reservation system at the busiest times. Again, so people can go there and have the experience they're looking for. And in the wilderness, we were seeing unacceptable impacts. Where the wilderness was being trammeled, there was no solitude, human waste was everywhere. And so now for overnight camping in the portions of the Maroon Bells Snowmass Wilderness, you have to get a permit and pay for a permit. And so far, people have been really positive about the responses because they saw how bad it was getting.
Well, as supervisor for White River National Forest, I imagine this is something you think about a lot. How do you think about, and how do you want people to think about balancing access for visitors with keeping the forest in these beautiful areas healthy?
I think it starts with just that. I think we have to be better about being more transparent, and people don't even recognize what the impacts are. There's studies that if you disturb elk during calving area, cow elk during calving season, it only takes like twice and they'll abandon that area. People don't realize that just the act of hiking by or walking by is a form of disturbance. So we've got to continue to work on educating people about what the effects are, and then we have to work collaboratively with communities, stakeholders, partners, business owners, people to say, okay, are there areas we need to put in more bathrooms or larger parking areas? Are there areas we don't want to put those things in and keep more pristine? And as we we're about to start our forest plan revision. I think this will be, if not the biggest, one of the biggest aspects of what we're going to do. And it is not easy, Erin. It's hard. The human dimension is the hardest thing to manage across the landscape.
Right.
But if we want the values that people tell me, the wildlife, the clean water, if we want those, we're going to have to make compromise elsewhere.
Yeah, some difficult decisions, perhaps.
Absolutely. We could manage this as an outdoor playground. That's fine. We're just going to give up other, values that are important to a lot of people. And so that's what we're working towards in the future.
Scott Fitzwilliams is supervisor of the White River National Forest. And those community conversations he mentioned will ramp up this fall. He says he'll host public meetings to help guide a new plan for managing recreation and preservation in the National Forest. Find more about this story in our show notes and at KUNC.org. And while you're there, check out some recent episodes of In The NoCo. We podcast every interview we publish, so you don't have to miss a minute of the show. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening to In The NoCo.